In this video, I will discuss why a writer's voice is so important and how you can develop your own original writing voice. I don't care what the plot is about or if it's a genre that I don't particularly care for. If the voice is beautiful, then I will read as many pages as I possibly can. A good voice can even make me become a lifelong fan of the author. Stephen King, Virginia Woolf, Justin Cronin, Michael Cunningham. Each time he or she puts out a new novel, I will likely buy it, simply because of their voice. The writer's voice is extremely important when constructing any story, especially a lengthy novel. I have edited other novels and watched the writer's voice change halfway through the novel, usually for the better. As they went along, they became more confident with their prose, which is good. However, the first half of their work didn't sound as fresh and assured as the second half. Readers will pick up on this. They know a change in voice when they read it. It's a drastic change in tone many times, and it might force the reader out of the fictional dream of your storytelling. So my mission in this video is to provide a few tips to help you develop your own voice now, so you don't have to go back and rewrite the first half of your novel. So what is a writer's voice? Well, that's a tough one. I guess each writer has their own definition. I would describe the writer's voice in two ways. One, how the author tells the story, and two, how the sentences appear on the physical page. A writer's voice can never be wrong because there isn't one answer for a good voice. Ultimately, that decision is up to the reader to judge your storytelling voice. I am here to provide ways for you to take into consideration how to improve your voice. A few qualities of a good voice are punctuation, length of sentences, the poetry of the language, and etiquette. Punctuation. I consider this point to be the most important. Ultimately, a writer's voice lives and dies by the punctuation they decide to put on the page. And by punctuation, I mean how many commas and italics are used. Using these frequently can alter your writer's voice big time, especially commas. I think commas make or break voice. A comma forces a pause in the sentence and makes the reader take in what was just read and what they will read next. Commas can build slight suspense in that way, and they can also make a sentence seem more poetic because of the pauses, as opposed to sentences without commas. Sentences without commas force a straightforward thought, whereas ones with commas make for ones that were designed with forethought and uniqueness. Some writers don't use italics at all in their prose because they think it will confuse the reader. Others use it sparingly. I think this is fine. An italicized word here and there can make an impression. If italics are used for full sentences, then your voice could suffer because the reader has to stop and discover why italics was used for that long. Was it a certain character who used it? Why was the dialogue so important that italics were used? What did the author want me to experience differently because that sentence was all italics? You want to stay away from anything that could whip your reader away from the story. Length of sentences. Some writers choose to write quick, short sentences that get to the point. They get in and they get out, and they leave a brief message when they end and start again. Short sentences you might think are easy because they are simply shorter. You would be wrong to assume that. There needs to be much thought that goes into a short sentence because it needs to pack a punch each time. Writing short sentences is a skill I suggest you try and master along the way because it will help you develop your voice and develop suspense tactics. Long sentences provide a much different effect. They tend to incorporate many thoughts at one time, which can cover interior monologue more fully at times. However, long sentences have the issue of boring a reader. Long sentences might mistakenly fuel the writer's pride in his prose ability, but it could take the reader out of the story because a sentence goes on too long when it should have stopped several clauses ago. When I write, I like to incorporate both short and long sentences into my prose, but that's just me. The poetry of the language. I am a sucker for poetic prose. The way the words spill out on the page in a way that only a true artist can will make me reread the book again and again. For example, once you read a plot-driven novel, you now know what happens. That's it. But if that same novel was written with beautiful prose, then you might likely read that novel again to experience the language itself. To enhance your use of prose in this way, I suggest you read mounds of poetry, especially before you write your novel. And I mean minutes before you write your novel. Choose a poet you enjoy, read a few poems or verses, and then get to writing your novel. The structure and word choices of that poet's language will stay with you and help you develop your own poetic prose as you write your novel. Etiquette. This depends on the narrator himself or how you want your voice to affect your readers. For example, swearing. A story told in the first person forces a realistic experience that the third person doesn't necessarily provide. People swear in real life all the time, and that cussing will make that person appear differently to others. Some might enjoy the swearing. They might relate to you because they swear too. Others might find it offensive if you swear and not want to experience you in the future. If your narrator swears, it will have these effects on a reader, absolutely guaranteed. And that goes for slang too. Slang, I think, is easier to get away with because you can have the narrator immediately describe to the reader what that slang meant. However, slang can make the voice appear discombobulated if it is used too often. And it might make the reader think the writer is trying too hard to tell the story. Personally, I don't mind reading slang as long as I can figure it out quickly before I get to the next sentence. When slang becomes the predominant language of the story, it may lose the reader. And while we're talking about language, I would like to say that writing a specific dialect in prose is risky. For example, a southern accent depicted in prose as it sounds in real life is not something that I find intriguing. It makes me focus on a single word rather than allowing me to take in the words within a sentence in one sweeping motion of the eye. Know and study the basics of English grammar. You need to fall in love with grammar. It might not seem like something you might need to know in voice, but it will help you in the long run to be taken as a serious writer. Your ability to express a clear thought in either a straightforward or poetic sentence depends fully on knowing grammar. Once you know these rules, you can bend or break them depending on the circumstance, and your reader won't mind because you have proven yourself as a credible writer. Verbs. The verb possibly is the most important type of word in the English language. A verb is a fuel for the fire, and depending on the writer, they can add gasoline to that fire to make it rise or douse to let the fire dwindle to nothing. Know your verbs and which ones to use at the right time. A good verb can catapult a sentence into a new direction just by changing a verb. And I should mention the overwhelming conversation of using active verbs as opposed to passive verbs. Yes, I say use active verbs if you can, but don't allow it to refrain from you telling a good story. If the scene calls for you to use a passive verb, then go for it. Your prose and the overall story will not suffer from passive verbs. I have read countless novels where authors use passive verbs all throughout the story, and it was just fine. Remember, telling a good story is what truly counts. Adjectives and adverbs. I love adjectives. Rather than suffer from 5 sentences of an author telling me about the sunrise, they can load one sentence with a few powerful adjectives to get the job done and move on to something else. For example, it was the way the sunrise consumed the sky, impending, vibrant, gentle, all-knowing, before she realized she was late for breakfast. That sentence is simple and describes the sunrise just enough. Adverbs are another itch that editors out there feel they must complain about ad nauseum. I am indifferent to adverbs, always have been. Editors treat adverbs like the plague for some reason, and I never understood that. If your character ran quickly after the sunrise, then say so, it's okay. If your character launched into a hard run after the sunrise, that's okay too. I doubt any writer with any amount of writing experience will use so many adverbs in their prose that it will affect their storytelling. Overused words. Now, this is something that I most certainly have a problem with. I remember being in college and I had to edit another student's paper. She had used the word abstract in nearly every single sentence. It was used so many times that I just circled it every time I saw it and added a comment to the back page telling her to think of different words. Words other than prepositions in articles stick out like a sore thumb. So if I see a power verb or a particular noun used too close to one another, I will make sure that writer changes it. I don't like seeing the same word used on the same page. I expect you to have a better handle on English vocabulary than that. Always try to use different words in your prose. Change it up. Surprise me with your knowledge of words. There are literally thousands of words out there. There's no reason you should be using the same word within the same paragraph, or God forbid, the same sentence. You are better than that. And there you go. There's a few pointers to improve your voice. Take care.